Welcome to Globo-Fest, Latin America. The earliest people in the Americas are thought to have migrated there 15,000 years ago from Asia via a land bridge along the Bering Strait between Alaska and Russia. From there, people gradually are believed to have followed animal herds throughout North America and heading south into Central and South America. These early people eventually established settled lifestyles, food surpluses, and complex civilizations during the Neolithic era between 8500 and 2000 BCE in the Americas. Pre-Columbian or Mesoamerican civilizations include the Olmecs, the Mayas, and the Aztecs. In South America, the Inca emerged as the most influential civilization there. The Olmec civilization is believed to be the parent culture of the Mayas and Aztecs. The Olmec culture was one of many agricultural societies to emerge between 1500 and 1200 BCE. The Olmec culture was located in south-central Mexico and, unlike other early civilizations, was not located on a river system. Not a lot is known about this culture, other than some of the large stone heads left behind, as well as artifacts made of jade and obsidian, indicating the Olmecs had contact or trade with faraway groups of people. The Olmecs were polytheistic, it is believed, as were subsequent civilizations, and were believed to have practiced human sacrifice. The Olmecs built pyramid-shaped temples and developed a calendar. Other early civilizations in South America include the Chavín people, who came from the Andes Mountains region. These people emerged around 2600 BCE and are thought to be ancestors to the later Inca civilization. These people were skilled metalworkers, domesticated the llama, and created a system of record keeping called quipu, a complex system of tying knots on strings. This society was also polytheistic, and they were skilled textile producers. The Olmec civilization is the parent or mother civilization to both the Mayas and the Aztecs. The Mayas were located in southern Mexico and Central America and existed from around 300 Common Era to 900 CE. They established city-states, complex farming techniques, they built temples, developed roads for trade. They had priests who conducted religious ceremonies and ruled over society and maintained a distinct social hierarchy, with each Mayan city with its own chief, a noble class, and then farmers. The Maya engaged in warfare with neighbors, helped to develop a 365-day calendar. They used slash-and-burn farming techniques to develop a food surplus, and they built giant pyramid-shaped temples. The Maya abandoned their cities around 900 CE, but many people still speak Mayan-based indigenous languages in Central America even today. One of the largest cities thought to have been influenced by the Maya, as well as by other tribes like the Zapotec and Mixtec peoples, was Teotihuacan, which boasted a population of 125,000 to 200,000 people, and existed between 100 BCE and 750 CE. The Maya are also believed to engage in human sacrifice. The Maya created farmland by draining swamps and built floating islands, or chiampas, in shallow lakes to adapt to the terrain and grow more food. The Aztecs also used these techniques later. The Maya created a written language using a hieroglyphic-like script. They understood complex numerical concepts like zero and had polytheistic beliefs in gods like Quetzalcoatl. The Maya mysteriously abandoned their cities, possibly due to a volcanic event, around 900 CE, and it's believed that a group of people called the Toltecs, a group of warring people, took their place. Early governments in the Americas were almost primarily under city-states, with each city ruled over by its surrounding area and people. These city-states were known to war with one another. These city-states under the Maya, or the city-states under the Maya, which disappeared around 900 CE, are thought to have had contact with another group of people in Mexico called the Aztecs. The Aztecs also trace their roots to the Olmec parent culture. The Aztecs inhabited central Mexico between the mid-1200 CE until their conquering by the Spanish in 1520 CE. The Aztecs built their capital at Tenochtitlan, modern-day Mexico City, and gained power by establishing alliances with neighboring city-states. The Aztecs were known for their military conquest and empire expansion and soon controlled much of modern-day Mexico. The Aztecs had powerful emperors who ruled over them, unlike the Maya, who were ruled over by their priests. This emperor was at the top of a complex social hierarchy made up of nobles, priests, warriors, traders, farmers, and then slaves. The Aztecs were polytheistic and built a large temple in the center of Tenochtitlan. Human sacrifice was common on a much larger scale than both the Maya and Olmec civilizations. The Aztecs developed modern medical techniques and could set bones and treat dental cavities. The Aztec temple at Tenochtitlan was built on 2 islands in the middle of Lake Texcoco, and like the Maya, created floating gardens or chinampas for agriculture, raising a variety of crops including squash, beans, and corn. The Aztecs also developed a highly defined tax system and method for efficient tax collection. This tributary system also provided food and wealth for the Aztec people and built a complex road system for trade. At its height, the Aztec Empire boasted a population of between 5 to 12 million people. The Aztecs were defeated by the Spanish, led by Hernando Cortes during the 1500s. In the Andes region of South America, a group of people called the Moche replaced what had been the Chavin civilization and flourished between 200 and 700 CE. These groups of people were early ancestors to the Incas, who established an empire there from 1300 to 1500 CE. The Incas reached their height in just under a century, and they built an empire that spanned over 3,000 miles from Peru to Chile. They used domesticated animals like the llama and adapted to their mountainous environments in the Andes by developing a system of terrace farming to grow crops like potatoes and quinoa. They developed a complex labor system called the mita, which required citizens to take turns fulfilling labor obligations on behalf of the empire. The Inca continued to use the quipu knot tying method as a method of communication and record keeping. The Incans are perhaps best known for their 13,000-mile-long road system, their ability to speedily deliver messages along this network via foot messengers, as well as their complex government bureaucracy led by a divine right emperor known as the Great Inca. The Inca were polytheistic. They built complex bridges from reeds and vines and had a capital city at Cusco, modern day Peru. And they built an impressive Temple of the Sun, built with large stone blocks held together by gravity and sheer force, Machu Picchu. The Incas performed complex surgeries and developed antiseptics and anesthesia for complex brain surgeries even. The Incan Empire came to an end in the 1500s by the Spanish conquistador led by Francisco Pizarro. Europeans came into contact with the Americas, calling this area the New World during the European Age of Exploration, also referred to as the Age of Old Imperialism. Led by powerful divine right absolute monarchs in Europe, countries like Spain and Portugal initially led this overseas exploration due to what was then high-tech exploratory tools like the astrolabe, magnetic compass, and caravel ships. Portugal and Spain will dominate the 14 and 1500s in terms of economic might and exploration, setting up mercantilism-based trade routes between Europe and the Americas. Other European nations will follow suit during the 16 and 1700s, like the Netherlands, England, and France. The European arrival in the Americas, beginning in the 1490s, will forever impact Latin American cultures and lead to defeat of the Aztecs and Incas, will lead to a Spanish and Portuguese empire and later a French and English one in the Americas. European colonies will conduct trade for the benefit of their mother countries, also known as mercantilism. Europeans were motivated during this era by God, gold, and glory. This was also known as the Age of Old Imperialism or Age of European Exploration, and we're going to see plantations set up across the Americas, first exploiting Native American populations and then in the late 1500s switching to African labor instead. The Spanish led the conquering and colonization of the Americas during the 1500s, due in part to the line of demarcation set forth by Pope Alexander VI following Christopher Columbus's voyage in 1492 on behalf of the Spanish monarchy, which essentially divided the European and non-European world into 2 zones. Spain was permitted to colonize everything to the west of this line, and the Portuguese were permitted to everything to the east of the line. This line shifted under an agreement between the 2 nations called the Treaty of Tordesillas. This agreement can clearly be seen on a map of the Americas today. Most countries in Latin America speak Spanish, corresponding to a region west of the line, and Brazil is where Portuguese is spoken and lies east of this line, clearly demonstrating where each nation's colonization occurred. The Spanish immediately set out to conquer their territories and the native populations who were already living there by sending in the conquistadors or conquerors under the precepts of God, gold, and glory. Notable conquerors included Francisco Pizarro, who conquered the Incas, as well as Hernando Cortez, who conquered the Aztecs. The Spanish were successful in this conquest for a number of reasons. One, they used modern armor, horses, and new weaponry. Secondly, the Spanish found allies among Native American groups who disliked the Aztecs and the Incas. And finally, the Europeans brought diseases with them that killed millions of the native population who had zero immunity to these new diseases. The Spanish will later battle nations like England and France for territory in North America during the 16 and 1700s. The Spanish and Portuguese helped establish a triangular trade route across the Atlantic, which connected the Old World, or Europe, and the New World, the Americas, as well as the African continent. The Spanish rewarded their conquistadors with large tracts of land called encomiendas. On these encomiendas, large plantations called haciendas were set up to grow crops like sugarcane, tobacco, and indigo. The Spanish permitted encomienda holders to do whatever they wanted to the native populations, including enslave them and murder them. Eventually, many people recognized the cruelty of these practices, including a famous priest named Bartholomew de las Casas, who implored the King of Spain to stop the enslavement of the Native Americans and encouraged the Spanish to look elsewhere for their labor needs. Following the banning of the enslavement of Native Americans, the Spanish and Portuguese began actively engaging in the African slave trade, essentially helping to set up the triangular trade routes. The African slave trade resulted in up to 11 million Africans being sent to the Americas via the deplorable Middle Passage journey, with many losing their lives along the way. The slave trade resulted in local wars in Africa, a diaspora or forced migration of African people around the globe, and a negative legacy, to say the least. The triangular trade of goods and slaves between the three continents was part of the broader Columbian exchange of goods, animals, and products, making their way back and forth across the Atlantic. Crops like corn, potatoes, beans, and squash made their way to Europe and Africa, while animals like horses and pigs made their way to the Americas, along with crops like bananas, wheat, and sweet potatoes. However, the Columbian exchange also included diseases like typhus and smallpox coming to the Americas as well and killing much of the population. The economic system that dominated the age of European exploration, or age of old imperialism, was mercantilism. We will begin to see individuals investing their own capital in order to make a profit during the 16 and 1700s later on, leading to a new economic practice called capitalism. The Europeans set up colonial empires in the Americas, most notably the Spanish. During the 1500s, the Spanish Empire in the Americas spanned California to South America. Part of this colonial network revolved around a complex social system called the peninsular system, as well as revolved around the Catholic Church. Spain maintained strict control over its colonies, with the absolute monarch back in Spain sending government representatives or envoys to rule over the colonies. These envoys were called viceroys, and they ruled over individual colonies on behalf of the Spanish king. Additionally, the Spanish Church, or Catholic Church, maintained much influence over the colonies and helped the Spanish keep control over colonists' lives. The Catholic Church also converted thousands to Christianity and set up missions and churches across Latin America. The peninsular system emerged as part of this complex social system that dominated people's lives in the Spanish colonies. At the top of the system were the peninsulares, who were Spanish-born citizens who were given power to rule over the colonies. These were people like the viceroys. The peninsulares were followed by the Creoles, who were a group of people of European descent who were well educated but born in the colonies, and as such were kept out of major governmental roles, which was frustrating for them. Below the Creoles were the mestizos and the mulattoes, who were groups of mixed European and Indian or mixed European and African descent peoples. Below these people were Native American people and people of African descent. This complex social system determined which jobs people could hold in society, and in many ways is still reflected in modern Latin American society today. Eventually, following the Enlightenment period in Europe and inspired by thinkers like John Locke, Creoles in Latin America will rebel against the Spanish government and launch independence movements in the early 1800s. These Creoles were also inspired by the American and French revolutions for independence in the late 1700s. Well-known independence leaders included Toussaint Louverture in the French colony of Haiti. Louverture was a former African slave who planned a revolt against French rule. Louverture was inspired by French Enlightenment thinkers and was well educated. Under Louverture's military leadership, he helped free the land from French rule in 1798. Napoleon later reconquered Haiti in 1802. However, Louverture led the guerrilla war on Napoleon's troops, greatly weakening them. Louverture was captured and later died in a French prison in 1803. However, Haiti won its independence from France in 1804. Another well-known Latin American revolutionary leader was a Creole named Simón Bolívar. Bolívar was nicknamed the Liberator for his efforts to incite revolution across Latin America. Inspired by the French and American revolutions, he vowed to help nations gain independence from Spain. Beginning in 1810, Bolívar worked with other Latin American nationalists like José de San Martín and Bernardo O'Higgins to free the colonies from Spanish rule. Their military campaigns resulted in independence in 1822 for nations like Venezuela, Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia, which was named after Bolívar, as well as independence for Argentina and Chile. Despite independence, Bolívar failed to create his dream of a unified South America under one rule. Instead, individual colonies became independent nations. Some of the reasons Bolívar failed to create a single unified state included geographic challenges, like the immense size of South America, distances required to travel, as well as regionalism, which is the tendency of given regions to adhere to their own cultural identities. Although many colonies, including Mexico, gained their independence from Spain, many of these ended up with dictatorships later on, such as caudillo-type military rulers. Many of these independent nations will later face civil wars and the overthrow of dictatorships, like in Mexico in the early 1900s, as they struggle for stability. Instability is still an issue affecting people in Latin America. This is due to geographic barriers, social injustice. Many remnants of the peninsular system in Spanish colonies has continued to persist, including the emergence of powerful ruling families from the Creole class who exerted oligarchic control over their people. Strongman rulers called caudillos will take over in many Latin American nations, favoring the upper class elites. Many Latin American countries are still dependent on the cash crops introduced there by the Spanish and the Portuguese. Throughout all of this, the Roman Catholic Church has had a stabilizing effect across Latin America, and the Church still owns lots of land here and still exerts a great deal of influence